Welcome to Frankly Speaking with Sandra D, where we journey beyond the surface to uncover the essence of living an authentic, affluent life. I'm Sandra D, your companion guide on this path of self-discovery and empowerment. Welcome to another fantastic episode of Frankly Speaking with Sandra D. My name is Sandra Dorsey, and I am the host today, as you've gotten to know me over the few weeks that we've been journeying together. And of course, I promise to deliver the best of the best. And so in this episode, we will be speaking with attorney mediator Robin Caral Shaw, who is based in Florida, and she is licensed in both Washington, D.C. She's admitted to the bar in both Washington, D.C. and also in Florida. And I'm going to ask, it's always great to have the more direct introduction. So I'm going to ask Robin if you could tell the audience a little bit about who you are, fill in the blank of what, add to what I said just now.
Thank you, Sandra. I'd be happy to do that. I'm a native New Yorker, born and raised Midtown Manhattan largely, had the benefit of growing up in New York and had opportunities to engage in all kinds of intercultural, multinational, mind-expanding educational experiences. I started law school in New York. I was transferred to Washington, D.C. I was with a law firm in Washington, D.C. in the Watergate. Everybody knows about the Watergate. And was doing art law and tax law and food and drug law. Then I went international corporate. And then I moved to Florida after my son was born. And I have been a Florida attorney and mediator since 1998.
That's fantastic. Well, let me just say thank you so much for agreeing to join me. And I try to bring excitement, diversity, because I'm an investment banker, but many know me as a mediator as well. So I have dual practice. So it's always a joy when I have like-minded individuals come on the podcast to share with the audience their expertise and talent. So that said, thank you again for sharing that background. I forgot you were from New York. I always think Washington, D.C. and Florida, but New York is definitely there. Once you're a New Yorker, you can take the New Yorker out of New York, but you can't take the New York out of the New Yorker, correct?
It's so true, Sandra. That is so true. Absolutely.
And I'm sure it was an adjustment. For me, I grew up, of course, I'm born in Haiti, and I grew up in Montgomery County, Maryland, but most of everything I did was in Washington. I am such a northerner, and I have to constantly remind myself to tone it down. Even in mediation, I have to tone it down because I am very straightforward. I am very no nonsense. And I think that's what is needed because, being in Washington, everyone is so politically correct. But I actually cultivated that within myself too, that I feel like the art of communication is best served when somebody is direct. That said, can you explain to me what it's like to be a mediator, a lawyer? Because I'm a lay mediator. I have a master's in conflict analysis, but you actually have a law degree. Can you tell me what it's like to be a mediator and a lawyer jointly?
Challenge of being a mediator and a lawyer is in lawyering, we're always anticipating the answer and guiding people to the answer we want them to arrive at. In mediation, we're not doing that at all. And as a lawyer, I have to slow myself down and ask the questions so the participants can get where they want to go, not where I think they should go. So there's this constant tension between slow down, Robin, and listen to what they're saying rather than I'll tell you where I think you should go. And that's the challenge.
Yes, I can imagine. And it's not just for lawyers. I control the process. So that said, so what did inspire to follow the path of lawyering, the legal profession, and eventually as a mediator?
What prompted me to be a lawyer is sort of a very quick answer. I had been, as I think you know from my bio, I had been a ballerina And I, at one point, when I graduated from college, I was so tired of being criticized and hit. I said, I'm going to find something that has nothing to do with this. And I said, I might as well go to law school. So I went to law school after college. The second thing that inspired me was becoming a parent, because when my son was born, I wanted him to remember in a good way what I was saying, not just some scolding, rigid, dictatorial parent. So it taught me to slow down and use the 6-second delay that they use on live television and think about what I was saying before I said it. Those two things, the desire to get away from abuse and the need to communicate in a positive way with my son that would be enduring, were the two things that took me to mediation.
Well, that's fantastic. We'll get into the different areas that mediation serves, but I wanted to talk to you. So, segue into becoming a mediator, and then you've now actually established a training practice for
Yes.
for other mediators. So you have judges training with you, other attorneys
Yes.
training with you, people like
Yes.
myself who are not of the legal
Right.
profession. So tell
Yes.
me when that decision was made and how it was made, and what do you think?
Thank you, excuse me. I was very fortunate to have trained with people who owned and established a school. I was brought into the school to start teaching a few years after I became certified as a family and county mediator. So I had some practice training. Fast forward, I became the principal trainer for the mediation training group that I now own. It was established in the year 2000. And when the owner died, I took over the business that had been established under the greatly respected name of Susan Dubois. So when I bought the mediation training group, people knew me for 15 years already, and they knew Susan. So it gave my business now, Mediation Training Group, a lot of forward momentum because there was a great reputation in the community.
Yes, so you've chosen some areas, and I know we have some shared personal stories of how challenging it can be to have a training school. I mean, I'm not a trainer, but we've interacted in the past as some of the necessary steps that are involved in making sure that the process of training is conducted in a certain manner for both yourself and for the students. There are preparations that take place, and then there are after post course that take place, and you are so effective. So that I could tell would probably train you to become one of the most patient people on the planet. And so, are there any times where you could just say, I want to let go because I'm managing three? Actually, I'm wearing three hats. So, you're still a practicing attorney, you're a mediator, you're still mediating, and
Yes.
you are also training. So,
Yes.
which is your favorite of the three, and which is the least favorite of the three?
It's a wonderful question. I ask myself that almost every day. I love building the school. I have enlarged the online training opportunities well beyond what they were when I took over in 2019. I have lunchtime programs, I have half-day programs, I have programs just because people ask me to do a program, which is wonderfully interactive. So I love that. That's primary. You can't really teach if you don't continue to mediate, because you need new material. Every comedian needs new material. So I love the mediating, which really leads us to the law practice. I'm ready to stop practicing law. It's just that right now, I can't always rely on people signing up for the courses, but that would be my goal, to minimize and then step away from the law practice, stay an active attorney, but not take new clients.
That's interesting because I was Googling. I Googled, I think a month ago, because of all that's happening in the country and around the world. My father was an attorney, and I considered going to law school before I went to get my master's in conflict analysis and resolution when I was attending Nova. But something said, you know what? I know how my father did it. I'm going to do it differently. I come from a family of attorneys. My uncle was also an attorney. And so attorney diplomats, but I think they mostly were diplomacy. But the point is, in all the chaos that's happening in the world, I said, where are the good attorneys? Where are all the good attorneys? And where are the fearless attorneys? Where are these fearless attorneys that will stand for the law actually, I started creating this little mantra. I was like, I guess they went to law school to learn how to break the law versus how to apply the law. Because what we're seeing in the world today, and it's very disconcerting to me because I actually am someone who, as I cultivate within myself a sense of justice, a sense of truth, a sense of fairness and balance. It's not just for mediation, it's also in my personal life because I'm very spiritual. So it's interesting when I hear good people like you saying they want to leave the law. I was like, just what? No, you can't because we need the good ones. Let the bad ones leave. Let's keep the ones that we have that are so dedicated to actually practicing law, not breaking the law. So you, as a lawyer, you are completely partial to your client and to the person who's hiring you. But as a mediator, you have to apply what we call neutrality and impartiality because you're in the middle. And I must say, I'm a softie, and I like the underdog far too often. But I am a professional. So first of all, explain the role of neutrality and impartiality.
Excellent question. Neutrality means I don't care what decision you reach. This is your negotiation. This is not my best ideas. That's neutrality. Anything you decide is fine as long as it's legal. Impartiality means I don't favor one person over another. I don't favor one solution over another. I don't favor one idea over another. So I am both neutral as to the outcome and impartial as to the parties. That's not always easy to accomplish. Think about during COVID, I did a lot of mini mediations. May I give you an example?
Absolutely.
Okay.
You can
Here's
give
an example.
a few examples.
I got two. During COVID, a housekeeper was having an argument with the people that she cleaned for. They wanted to know if she had gotten vaccinated, and she refused to tell them. They didn't want to lose the cleaning lady. She didn't want to lose the job, but they couldn't figure out how to get out of their own way. Now, for you and I think an obvious solution is right there.
Right.
And it's called a mask, right?
Right.
It wouldn't matter if she was vaccinated if she wore a mask, and to either party. But they needed to have somebody like me sit with them in the living room so they could think it through. And what it really boiled down to was they needed permission to step away from their positions and agree to a middle ground. And I kept emphasizing the relationship between them. You want to keep this job, and the people want you to continue to work for them. So there has to be a way. And little by little, they inched toward what I considered very obvious, right? But they got there. And it's very hard not to step in during COVID to say, folks, just put on a mask.
Correct.
Keep my mouth shut.
That's fantastic. Well, it's interesting because I do it so naturally that I probably have some impersonal experiences. I mean, some informal processes where I've mediated without even knowing because it's second nature. So what steps do you feel like needs to be taken for all the parties to feel like they're represented? Because in my mediations, it's only 20% of my professional life that I spend mediating. I do want to increase that, but I don't network enough because I do so much business internationally. So the mediations that I conduct would have to be in Florida, and that would mean I would have to network. But for you, what do you feel when you get into a mediation? How do you ensure that the parties feel safe? How do you feel that they feel heard and represented? Because I think that's such a significant, and I'm only a Florida Supreme Court certified circuit civil, which means I'm more in the text, the words, the contracts and all of that. But for you, I know you also focus on family, don't you? You also mediate family.
Mediate family, county, appellate, and circuit. Yes, everything.
Oh, fantastic.
But it's all the same skill set. And it's exactly what you just said. How do you make people feel safe? And how do you help them inch toward an agreement? And this is my perspective on it. First of all, I tell them that confidentiality is either guaranteed by the law or guaranteed by them, between them. If it's not a lawsuit, I don't go into a lot of details. If it's not a lawsuit, they have to agree to confidentiality. So that means everything they talk about here, everybody jokes about what's said in Dallas, in Vegas stays in Vegas. It's the same thing. So there's no Beulah the buzzer that rings that they can take outside. There's no punishment, number one. Number two, I try to get them to think about the future. Litigation is all about punishing people for the past. You owe me money because you didn't do this, so. But mediation is all, what about tomorrow? Where do you want to be tomorrow? Do you want to continue arguing this tomorrow? So I try to work on the mindset. In addition to the mindset, I encourage them to put out the Christmas tree, put all ornaments on it. Tell me everything that you think you should have by the end of the day. Therefore, we have a lot of pieces in the jigsaw puzzle to move around on the table. We have lots of options and alternatives. Then I ask them how they want to put this jigsaw puzzle together, and I draw them in. The more they can get drawn in, the more power they feel they have. No one's shutting them up. No one's telling them that their time is up. No one's telling them what the answer is. And people buy in if you do it step by step, encouraging them.
Yeah, so that's fantastic. And definitely that feeling of safety is something that I put in the forefront of all my mediations. I mean, in every relationship, in every setting, I think people need to feel safe, whether you're actually in investment banking, finance, and everything. I've had a lot of people. I remember early on in my career as a banker, I worked on the mortgage side, and so many people would come in feeling very insecure about taking that first time, leap into the unknown of home ownership. And I would have to make them feel safe and know that it's going to be okay. You could do this. So yeah, I think it's human to try to make people feel at ease when they're getting out of their comfort zone. But you touched a little bit about litigation. So can you get a little bit more detailed about the difference between mediation
Sure.
and litigation?
Oh, I'd be happy to. I was a litigator for 15 years, so I can tell you, I know it's really this different. I always describe mediation as the not litigation, the anti-litigation, for reasons like this. Mediation is private. Every courthouse in the country is public. Anybody can walk in and watch, right? That doesn't happen in mediation, so it's private, number one. Number two, only the people who everybody agrees can be there. And that includes emotional support dogs and everything else, only if everybody agrees. So we're already doing like mini mediations. In the courtroom, there's a court reporter, there's a stenographer. Mediation is absolutely confidential, no court reporter. In the courtroom, people have to be under oath. In mediation, no oath, just have a conversation. In the courtroom, the judge may never hear from the complaining party. The judge will only hear from the lawyers in most cases. So the parties have no chance to tell their story in most situations. There are exceptions, of course. In mediation, the law says it is the parties who are important, not the lawyers. The lawyers are there to assist, but not take over from the parties. In litigation, the parties are in a very formal environment, very rigid. Nobody can get up and walk around and, if you sneeze, everybody looks at you. In mediation, again, it's just a conversation, whether it's on Zoom or in person. Everybody is just chatting. You want to take a break? We take a break. It's those kinds of things that build the trustworthy environment.
Indeed, I agree. So are you still doing in-person mediations? Because I know
Yes.
COVID took us back, well, took us forward, I should say, took us forward into the virtual reality experience. So
Yep.
you are still doing in-person.
I'll do it any way the parties want to do it.
So
All
what
right.
percentage of your practice is in person?
Well, let me give you the examples and then I'll talk
Okay,
about that.
go ahead.
Small business people, for example, a case I handled, there was a software developer who had an investor. They were breaking up. They wanted to be together. That's fine. I do low conflict divorce, not high conflict. If they want to argue, I'm not putting minutes in my life into their arguing. They want to argue, they can get another mediator. But since it's low conflict, they'll often sit at the same table and they'll just allocate and discuss. If I can help them have that low stress environment, we can do it in person. When lawyers get involved, then it tends to be on Zoom because the lawyers don't want to get up and go anywhere.
Right.
If there are older people involved, it tends to be on Zoom because even though they're often technophobic, when they're on Zoom, all they have to do is sit there and it's fine. So I would say it's probably 60% on Zoom, maybe 40% in person now.
That's fantastic. So on the topic of being in the same room, so as part of mediation, we have one of the tools that we call caucusing, which is, you want to describe caucusing before I ask the question?
Sure. Well, caucus means anybody in the mediation can meet with anybody at any time. So if it's a brother and a sister arguing over a probate case and they want to get away from the lawyers and the mediators, they can ask to have a private chat and I'll put them in a private room, whether it's virtual or not. Often the mediator may ask to meet with one side or the other to explore a particular point. That's private meetings, private sessions is caucus.
That's fantastic. So that sort of links to the conversation we had earlier about feeling safe. And I use that tool when I feel that there is a need for more safety in the process. Is that how you use it as well?
I try to use it, yes, but yes with an asterisk. When we break into separate rooms, there's an immediate increase in the distrust of the mediator by the party who's not meeting with me. She's being persuaded, she's being lied to, she sides with them. So if we're talking about safety, in that respect, caucus works against it because it's developing negatives. On the other hand, sometimes people are unduly emotional. Sometimes people need to talk to their lawyers. Sometimes people want to ask me something. So I use caucus as a condiment. I'm going to chat with one side for a minute. We'll be back very soon. And then I'll go and we'll have that. And then I want to bring them back. Since we don't mediate criminal cases, nobody's been really hurt, right? And when there's domestic violence, you're not allowed to mediate. So that takes that out, right? So really we have people who've had an argument and they don't know how to get out of their own way. So in my world, it's better to keep them together and use caucus as a condiment, to have that important focused private meeting and then bring everybody back.
That's fantastic. And so for me, yes, I love the different tools that we have in mediations. So I want you to give the audience, let's say from start to finish, one of the hardest mediations you've ever had. So in various types. So let's talk about the various types of mediation at first. And I know because you're a corporate attorney, so you must do a lot of corporate contract mediations.
Yes.
But also you're doing family. So talk about the different types that there are at this.
Okay. In the state of Florida, we can mediate, if I'm properly answering your question,
Go ahead.
Okay. In the state of Florida, we can mediate anything having to do with the family. Doesn't have to be divorce. It can be paternity, it can be child support, it can be grandparent rights, it can be adoption, anything. We mediate that. And that is based on the relationship between the parties. A child of, a parent of, a husband of, whatever. That's number one. Number two, there are two levels of trial courts in the state of Florida that are only differentiated by the size of the lawsuit. $50,000 and under is in county court, which is a trial court. There's a judge. $50,001 and up is circuit court. Same thing, trial court, there's a judge. There may be a jury in either of those cases, but under very limited circumstances. There are no juries in family court. There's also appellate mediation. After people have gone to trial, if somebody is unhappy with the result, they can appeal the case, and that goes to an appellate mediator. And I was the first appellate mediator in Palm Beach County, certified anyway. And I find appellate mediation, more than 50% of all appellate mediations are family law cases.
Really?
Which is fascinating. Yep. And then the fifth form of mediation is dependency, which is a situation where it is determined whether a child should be taken away from the parents under various circumstances. So those are the 5 different areas that are mediated. There is no criminal case at all that is mediated in the state of Florida.
So tell me of one or 2 or 3 different case scenarios that you've had that actually have stayed with you in all your career. That's the one that you will tell all the grandchildren about, that you're either proud of or not proud of. So if you could share that with us.
Sure, I'd be happy to. As a matter of fact, I have a list that I use remember the last day of mediation certification, you do role plays, and I use a dozen or 2 of my favorite cases rotating. So I'm all good to answer that question. One of the most poignant mediations I ever did was years ago, and it was family. A young professional couple had a child, their first child born with severe cystic fibrosis. It caused the mother to have to stay at home and put a huge amount of pressure on the father to bring in more money because they had massive medical expenses, and it blew up the marriage. They came to me for mediation as they thought they were getting divorced, and we sat down and we worked through the numbers. Can you afford to get divorced? Can you afford to have two houses? Can you afford to do the medical care with the additional expenses? So even though I never approach mediation as therapy or counseling, in that situation, they were educated enough to look at the numbers and see that they could not afford to get divorced. Tragically, the elephant in the room was, we don't know how long this child is going to live. That was very sobering. And every time I think about that, that's a tough one. Personal injury, death, wrongful death of a child as a result of medical malpractice. The insurance company knew that the doctors, hospital, whoever it was, had done wrong, and they were throwing a lot of money at the parents. And the parents were just heartbroken. There was, you can't
No
buy my
amount of
child
money.
back.
Correct.
So in that one, my reality testing, in the first one, my reality testing was financial. In this one, my reality testing was to ask them the question, what would your daughter want you to do with that money if you did take it? So instead of being a price on her head, it became, how can we respect her? And then they started talking about funding a chair at a school and naming a wing, or it became a different purpose for having the money. And that allowed them to move forward in that one. So that's a personal injury one. The last one I'll mention, unless you want me to go on more, was
go ahead.
Okay, I was mediating for the post office. We can talk about postal mediation separately, but everybody knows that going postal, there were a lot of shootings between postal employees. Well, I was mediating in 2001, 2002 when anthrax was around, and that anthrax death occurred here in Boca Raton. Right, the fellow who died was here in Boca Raton, and I was mediating.
I forgot where it was, but yeah, I remember the case.
Yeah, it was in my local post office.
Oh my goodness!
And he happened to be the uncle of a mediator in Broward County, a woman I know very well.
Oh my goodness!
So it was very local. But the postal employees, the ones who unloaded the gray sacks of mail from the 18-wheelers, and the ones who were sorting the mail in the post office to distribute it to the letter carriers. We were doing one mediation after another, and they said, this anthrax thing, we don't know who else it's going to kill. We don't know how many envelopes are out there. You've got to let us change our clothes or wash our hands or rotate our schedules or do something. And one after the other, the management reps who were there were told, you do absolutely nothing. We can't have mayhem in the post office. We will wait and see what happens. So their concerns, the letter carriers' concerns, were very real.
Of course.
Fortunately, nobody else died. But management just put the foot down and said, no. And those were difficult mediations because, very much like COVID, it was irrational. And you couldn't smell it or taste it or see it. So what was happening? But those were amazing mediations.
Which makes you such a well-rounded professional. I mean, I didn't train with you, but I just hearing you, and I've known, of course, your reputation in the field in our, how can I say, in our realm, but just hearing you directly now makes me understand why you're so respected and valued. So on that topic, postal mediation, talk to me a little bit about you, because you've been in the field for some time, what you see is working and what you see isn't working. How, if you had the magic wand, if you were the decision maker in this field, what would you say would be the things that you would address first as to needing to improve? And what do you think which one do you think is working? Well, of course, we're only referring to the state of Florida, but you hear about mediations nationwide. So tell me a bit about what your perspective is in the overall field of mediation.
Only 7 states have certification programs so that we elevate mediation training above what the other 43 states do. Therefore, we very often have people from out of state, and it informs us. It's interesting. The biggest problem I have is in a lack of required mediator continuing education. When people finish the 40-hour course, the only hoops they have to jump through are financial, pay the application fee, and get fingerprinted. and
True.
they've got to do observations. They have to watch other mediators. And then they're good for 2 years. Well,
True.
what are they learning after that 40 hours?
Very true.
And then after the 40 hours, all they need is 16 hours over the next 2 years of continuing education. That's just not enough. That's not enough. We have real cases. We have real, the stories I've given you are very real. They don't want people who don't know what they're doing.
Correct.
So I would triple it. I would say 10 or 15 credits a year, and I would thin the ranks to eliminate the people who just sort of did it as a hobby and did the minimum.
Correct.
I think that would elevate the practice and the perception of mediation in the community.
Correct. And I have no doubt that, I mean, I would definitely benefit from it. I actually go through, I attend some of these conferences and benefit from some of the sessions so I can improve my stance as a professional because I take this field so seriously. And that's also one of the reasons I don't participate in the field of family mediation because I feel that you need to be so balanced and so emotionally grounded in order. But I don't think that people think enough about what they're bringing to the table and what's required of them, especially in family mediation. And like I said, I've considered it before. I've spoken to you about getting certified in that area, but I said, I'm not in a place where I want to do that because my heartstrings get pulled and, I'm for the underdog. Next thing I know, I'm impartial. Next thing I know, I'm getting called out. But the thing is, it is something that needs to be discussed because just like any field, like in my field of financing, I remember when the 2008 crash happened, there were so many people financing properties that had no business being financed. And now they sort of tightened the regulations. Everyone has to be licensed. There are things that change. So I always say, why do we have to wait for something tragic to happen before? Because we know what the red flags are, right? We know. And I've met some attorneys that say they're mediators. I said, you're a mediator? But anyway, that's just me. So thank you so much for that. So as we wrap up this segment, I want to ask you, what do you want to share with the public? Why would someone want to become a mediator? We talk about what is necessary to improve the field, but why would someone who is considering it want to become a mediator?
Any of us want to help people, right? Many of us are givers, as you are, right?
Yes.
But in order to give effectively, you need to have some tools. It's not enough to just say, I see how hard this is for you, or I feel sorry for you. You need to help people constructively. You need to help them think their way out of their problem or be creative about their problem. And mediation teaches you how to ask questions that cause people to think. For example, I say to people, tell me your story. All right, tell me your story. I want to listen. And then I say, tell me what you want. And then the last question is, tell me why you want it. I want them to be analytical and introspective. Why do you want that? Why is that important to you? What are you willing to give up to accomplish that? What do you need? And then why do you need it? Why are you willing to give it up? And I think if we say to people, if we ask them those kinds of questions, we can help them clarify in their own mind how to climb out of their problem. If you have a friend who's having a construction issue at home, is it that you want to get the floor finished and he isn't helping, or is it that you don't like him? If you don't like him, then you're confusing getting the floor finished with you're not liking him. You have to separate and organize. So I ask people what they want and why they want it and help them move on from there. That's what I would like people to think about in considering whether or not to be a mediator.
Yes. And also, so on the other side of the coin, why would someone seek someone like you out for mediation?
Wonderful question. Number one, you don't need a lawyer to help you solve a problem. If you want to argue about it and spend a lot of money, you can hire a lawyer. But if you just want to get the floor finished, if I can go back to that example, then having somebody who's neutral and impartial help you talk to that contractor in figuring out a plan for getting the floor finished, that's why people use a mediator. It is more efficient. It is generally less expensive. You don't need a lawyer, and you get directly to the heart of the problem. There isn't a lot of paper exchange and a lot of money going back and forth. You focus on the problem, you create a team, and you see if you can get it done.
Fantastic. And about training, why would someone seek you out, Robin, to
The
train
training,
as a mediator?
you see how passionate I am.
Yes,
All
I
right.
do.
If you're going to sit in a class for 40 hours with somebody or 24 hours for the county, I think you need to be able to put in the time. And if I were just reading from a book or telling a story or lecturing, it wouldn't be as effective. I wouldn't be, not only would you be bored to death, but I wouldn't be delivering the necessary information because you'd be tuning me out. I'd be no better than a TV program that's on while you're preparing dinner. So I truly believe in this. I am very passionate about this. I have a lot of experience in this, and I love to have people come in and sit down and we can share experiences, and they have takeaways when they're done. They actually learn something.
Well, that's fantastic. So tell the audience if they want to reach you, just to as a potential mediator taking a class or someone who wants to hire you, how
Right.
can you reach you?
My email address is Robin, ROBIN, at ladymediator.net. Robin at ladymediator.net. And the training website is mediationtraining.group. The name of the company is Mediation Training Group. The website is mediationtraining.group.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you. I want to say thank you for the segment. We will be back. And Robin, this is an open invitation. Of course, I am passionate about the field of mediation and the law. As I said, I'm not going to let you leave the law because we need honest lawyers. So I want to say again, thank you for joining me on this episode of Frankly Speaking with Sandra D. And we will post all your contact information at the bottom of a note section of this podcast, and people can reach and let people know how to reach you. Thank you again. I hope you enjoyed this, and we shall return very soon.
Thank you, Sandra. It was a joy. Thank you so much.
Subscribe to Frankly Speaking with Sandra D and join us each week as we uncover stories of resilience, transformation, and the pursuit of your true affluence mindset.
And I won't sit down, won't back out. You can't ever shut me up.
Come and join me on this journey. I promise not to disappoint. Don't forget to make sure you like, subscribe, and share to be notified when a new episode is released.